I'm Emma Louise Coffey, and you're welcome to The Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. On this week's show is part 2 of our interview with Eddie O'Donnell, and he gives us his top tips to achieving 10 grazings per paddock per year.
I suppose the overall farm stock rate last year was around 2.6, it's up at 2.8 this year. So I suppose you have to have the pH. So we would have spread 700 tonne of lime after the last set of soil samples between the winter of 16 and all through summer 17, and we'll re-soil sample now in autumn of 2018 and reassess the lime again. Soil P, there would have been pigs in the farm back in the 90s. My uncle would have had them beside us here at home, and we would have been using some of that pig slurry on the home farm at the time, so that would have been helping the P and K to keep it right at that stage. But any land we would have taken on since, I suppose, would have been down a bit, so we would have had to work on it, and it would have been 18612 in March time. Instead of the second round of urea, it would have been 2 bags of 18612, and there might have been another bag mid-season and maybe a couple more bags in the back end of the year. We find that it's a very good fertilizer regards. It's balanced pretty well for grazing, but obviously if you're cutting silage or whatever, it would be in your 0730s or whatever. So I suppose it's back to just doing the basics. Like Dad would have always said, like when they were when he was farming like that, before I came back around at home, like they were always told, like if your silage ground you needed 2 or 3 bags of 0730, and it would have been always kind of hitting the plan what people were advising from Teagasc or whatever. So I suppose just trying to stick to the basics and obviously moving the slurry around the farm. We feel it's very utilised on a lot of farms, and like every paddock tries to get slurry here in the springtime before or after grazing, and nearly every paddock gets a few thousand gallons of solid water during the year as well, and we feel that's very beneficial to the whole thing, especially if a paddock's taken for bales, like it needs enough of K back onto it to keep the K index up on it, like, you know.
You mentioned the K, and the K offtake is huge, and it's something that Stan Lawler would have really emphasised at your farm. And based on that, you've also mentioned about the colour coded maps, and you're avoiding your low K paddocks for silage. But what else are you doing to manage those?
Yeah, so we're avoiding the low K paddocks by having them colour coded in the parlour. You can see them. So we're avoiding taking them for bales at any stage at all possible. So if that means we have to skip out of a paddock and go back into that for 12 or 13 days to graze it, if it's getting too strong or whatever, we just do that. And we try and get as much soil water out of the collecting yards back onto the paddocks throughout the year. And we can actually see, like, to November 16th they were sampled, and I know when they're sampled in November of this year, they're definitely going to be higher in K, because we know about the grass. They're producing more in the shoulders, and I suppose that's in last year and this spring again. So that's a typical sign that the K, P and K might be right in the paddock and starts to perform without reseeding or doing anything with it. So we're focusing on that, and I suppose just good grazing management. Like we're trying to utilise every blade of grass that grows within reason. Obviously, you're only going to get 80-85% utilisation anyway. So I think to the home farm was 14.5 tonne we utilised and 17 off it. So as you said, when you're taking off large quantities of grass, there's going to be a large uptake of K, so it's up to us then to manage that. We would have spread, there's no limit on K, so we would have spread probably, I suppose, maybe 80 to 100 units of Murray 0050 fertiliser at the back end of last year across the whole farm, and we will continue to do that to focus on keeping the K levels right. I remember being in New Zealand once, and they said to us, even just topical at the moment, that K was a cheap irrigator for them. So if they felt that the K levels were high in the soil, that it would take them longer. They wouldn't suffer as much in a drought as a farm that would have lower K, because they have a better root structure for the plant, like, you know.
Just to pick up then in terms of soil fertility, you're soil testing every 2 years, Eddie. Would this have been how regularly you would have done it in the past, or how did that differ?
Yeah, so we would have probably soil sampled in 2011 and soil sampled again in 2014 and in 2016, and they'll be done again this year now. So probably this would be the 4th time now in 7 years the farm will, 7 years the farm will have been soil sampled. So we feel it's for the money you're spending on fertilizer every year, say 450 euros a hectare, and it costs you maybe €3 a hectare for soil sample once. If you're saying you're spending €15 on a soil sample and you're putting 4 or 5 hectares into it, like it's very small money what the soil sample costs versus the return or what you're going to spend annually on fertilizer per hectare. So we feel there's a massive benefit in knowing exactly, and we're actually gone to the stage now. We're not going on just on the nutrient management plan for the irrigation, whatever, on the 5 hectares or so on. We're actually going to the paddock. So at home, to the generally 4 hectare paddock. So it's a paddock soil samples, and out farm it's 2 hectare paddocks up there. So it's only a 2 hectare soil sample. So you're getting more accurate results per paddock, and it helps you target in your fertilizer in a better way, like, you know. So we feel it's a no-brainer. People maybe say it, and if you get the whole job done, maybe €25 soil sample, but like it's really small money if you work it back on what you're actually spending every year on fertilizer anyway, like, you know.
And if we consider then reseeding, a really interesting aspect of your farm is that the difference between your top growing paddock and your bottom growing paddock, you know, they're very, very similar. You know, the difference might be 1 or 2 ton. Like this varies hugely, typically on farms where there could be a difference, say, of 6 or 8 ton across paddocks. What do you put that down to, Eddie?
Yeah, so I suppose we put it down. I suppose a lot of the farm would have been reseeded since 08, 09. We'd have reseeded the majority of the home place there. Some of it actually hasn't. Some of the home place, there's probably a third of the home farm, original home farm, hasn't been touched since I came back home. Some of it is actually there since 1993 and 1989, and the grass are still producing 18, 20 tons on them. It's just, I suppose, the grass was in time was okay and has been managed properly since, so they haven't been touched. And in the varieties we would have put in, we would have a good few monocultures on the farm through the monoculture trial, and we would have had one of the farms that's come onto the farm that we have leased would have been set down to Aston Energy Torella, a 50-50 mix, and we have found they work well together. Some people don't like Torella because it mightn't be as palatable, but Aston Energy is very palatable, so I suppose it works. They work well as a duo, and you get your spring and autumn growth out of it as well. So we would have been targeting, I suppose, at least 15 or 20% a year when as numbers were growing, our land was coming on, we were really vigorous in reseeding. The past 12 months now, last year we would have only reseeded maybe 6 or 7%. This year so far we've only reseeded 2%, and we don't plan to do any more reseeding for the rest of the year. Because even the out farms at this stage would have been taken on would be fully reseeded. So we feel that if you look after, it's about now looking at that wedge that you're talking about in these regards annually and seeing what paddocks have dropped off or are dropping off, or maybe looking at the persistency of the grass in them and taking them out from there to see can you improve them to try and grow more grass on the farm, like, you know.
And have you a preference, say, for spring or autumn reseeding? What's most appropriate?
Yeah, spring would be our preference. You go in there early April after a first round of grazing, or even grazing a second time, spray it off, and you could be back in 6 or 7 weeks, depending on the growth you get. But if it's set there by the middle to end of April, you could be back in there by the middle of June anyway, the 1st of July at the latest. Like, there's a quick turnaround, and we feel if you left the farm or the paddock in old grass for the whole year, we reckon you'd grow as much from when you get it back in grass to the end of the year as you would have if you left it for the whole year, and you still would have had 1 or not 2 grazes taken off in the springtime as well. So we feel that reseeding pays for itself in 18 months to 2 years maximum, like, you know.
You mentioned you're part of a monoculture trial. Have you preference for monocultures, or do you like a mix of, say, 2 or 3 different grasses?
Yeah, so on the home farm or on the milking blocks and the out farm as well, we would be preference now is probably stick with a monoculture. We're happy enough with them. Probably a tetraploid, especially on the home farm. On the out farm, wouldn't mind as much as it's a bit heavier. And we feel that the cows really love the tetraploids, and the farm is pretty dry at home. We don't need a terribly dense of a swart anyway, and we feel if they're grazed properly anyway, they'll take it up over time anyway. And on out farms in where you might be taking 1 cut of silage, where we are a 3-way mix all the way on them farms, we don't have any monocultures on them farms. So we would be using the working off PPI index for picking the grass seeds, and that's how we would have done it in the past, and we would be happy enough to continue doing it that way, like, you know.
And then moving on to infrastructure, like, I mean, you're getting cows out to grass from the 1st of February day and night, and you know that requires a certain level of infrastructure and flexibility in the system. What sort of infrastructure are you putting in place for the shoulders of the year?
Yeah, so the majority of the farm now would be 4 to 5 metre roadways through the majority of the farm, and then we would have spur roadways off, and to get and water to be 300, 330 gallon tanks. The cows would have access in every paddock, and there's 1.5 inch piping plumbed out with a reservoir tank in the yard, pumping the water out from that at a fairly high pressure, so you could fill a tank in 5 or 6 minutes out at the far end of the farm. So water is not an issue on the farm as it's been upgraded. Roadways we feel it's a constant cost on farm, and the farmers, I suppose anyone that was there on the day, they'll see there's long walks for the cows a lot of the time. It's probably averaging 800 or 900 metres per milking, I say, for the year. So the roadways have to be kept on really good order for the cows to prevent lameness. So we're topping them up nearly annually at this stage, if not every 18 months. So or resurfacing the top of them, and we feel it's an ongoing cost that farmers should just put into their budget as a fixed cost now on the farm rather than a variable cost. We wouldn't have any harm, and maybe it could be 7 or 8 reels going in the month of February there, because you might go to a paddock tonight and you might be able to go back near that for 3 days, and you might have to go off to a different angle of the farm altogether. So I suppose have plenty of reels and stakes on the farm, and don't be afraid to use them. And it does take time to set up, sacrifice maybe roadways to get into the back of a paddock or whatever, but over time I suppose you know where you need them at most, and if you only put in a metre of a narrow strip of road, maybe for 200 metres in the paddock to get you into the middle of it, it could be really good investment. And I have friends on even heavier ground than us now, and they would have gone and just done that over the last couple of years and put them in where they knew they were using them every year, and it's just a fixed item there now, and there's less work with it. So it's about just knowing your farm, I suppose, and getting to know it and working around that, that's what we've been doing over the last few years, and it's a constant thing. It's not something that just you say you've that done now and it's finished with forever,
Yeah, and I suppose with the weather too in the spring, that's tough on the roadways, so they need the constant bit of work. And and just something else that you mentioned was that your paddock size is typically 4 hectares now. Is that based on 24, 36 hour grazing per paddock, or what is that based on?
At the moment, it's probably between 24 and 36, and often we are moving because the herd size is moving a bit. So probably long term, it's probably more like a 6 hectare paddock that you're getting 36 hours in, realistically, for a 5-6 hectare paddock. So I suppose all we would have done in the past, it would have been originally 1 hectare paddocks on the original farm. We would have just taken up to wire and made them 2 hectare paddocks, and then we would have taken up to wire again and made them 4 hectare paddocks. So I suppose it's constantly judging what you are changing around. But I feel better performance is probably achieved on a 3 milking paddock, a 36 hour paddock, that the cows have a good feel for too, and they're working in for the third one to get it down to the 3.5-4 centimetres. And I feel there's better performance milk wise, better protein and better yield if you can work that system. We would have some paddocks that would be 48 hours as well, but we wouldn't go any longer than 48 hours because we feel they're eating regrowths after that and should compromise the next round.
Last year you had 50 grass walks recorded on Pasture Base Ireland. How has that evolved? How important is it for you to walk the farm that many times?
Yeah, so I suppose last year was a great grass year, as everyone knows. It was a pet year for all the world. It was an easy spring and the autumn obviously was difficult on most farms, but up until maybe September it was an easy enough year to manage the farm. So we would have been growing a lot of grass May, June, July last year, and so we were pretty average 45 plus walks for the last 4 or 5 years across both farms, because we're walking on Tuesday and Friday from maybe the 10th of April right through until the middle of August. And one of us in the home farm, myself or Philip, who was working with us here in the home farm, would have walked on one day and the other person would walk the other day. So so you're getting a good contrast as well. It's keeping you focused as well as regards the measurement. If one is out a bit today, the next person will pull it up to the next day. So we feel it's a massive benefit. And if you work up, it's back to the monetary figures again. If you go into a paddock that the cows shouldn't be in, that's gone too strong, well, the next 2 or 3 paddocks are all going to go too strong because you should have skipped them that 2 days and gone to the next one. And them 2 or 3 days is what is making the the milk stay in the tank if for all the world, like, you know, to keep it right. Because if you go into a paddock that's too strong, the milk will drop and it'll take a few days to recover and stuff. So we feel the benefit is there to walk the farm twice a week for the main growing season. And we start walking there with 20th of January and we will finish up there the 1st of December with a closing cover. So for December and January, I suppose there's no walks on. So the 50 walks in are divided over the other, 42 or 44 weeks, whatever it is, like, you know.
And I guess a lot of people would be in the same situation as you, that they do a grass walk in late January, and that would kind of establish then what farm cover is there for the springtime. A lot of people then would get very busy in February, March, and they'd say do very little on the farm. They'd monitor their percentage graze, but they wouldn't necessarily monitor their farm cover. Do you see, say, the spring rotation plan period and the 60-40 autumn plan period as important times for measurement on farms?
I feel it's very important to stay a walk on the farm because you're getting to see what's coming back as well. I suppose you're always looking, like, so we I suppose your grass year starts in the next fortnight, really, like, you know, and so the first week, second week of August, and we would do an autumn grass plan in right through until the 1st of May next year when we do the budget, and you'd know how many cows are calving or what many when they're calving and all that side, and you fill all that into your grass budget. So we want 950 of 1,000 of a cover the first week of February, so we closed at around 700. So we would actually have 70% of the home farm graze in October, and we'd only have 30% to graze in November. So generally the cows actually go in by night early November here, and we graze at 30% right up until the end of November because they're doing long walks, and we feel that they're not melting any condition off themselves, and the teeth are on lameness and stuff. So springtime, I feel, is very important to stay a walk on the farm, regardless of just using the spring rotation planner, because I feel you could miss on a good year. You could really miss out because you could actually finish maybe the 23rd or 4th of March. Now, I know last year and the year before might have been that way, but there was a couple of years there, and 2015 or 2014 even as an example, that you could actually finish the first round the 24th or 5th of March if you were stocked at a cow to acre, for example, or 2.5 cows to hectare, and you could have your third round starting again the 20th of April when some lads are only starting their second round. So there's a full rotation that you could gain there, and you could have saved feed. So whereas then this year, if you were by doing your grass covers weekly, we knew the first week of March there wasn't going to be enough back in the first paddock on the 1st of April when we normally plan to start the second round. So we knew we had to slow it down then. So we would have had 40% graze in February, decided then we had to slow it down to only go down to 55-60% by the middle of March instead of the 70-75 we normally be targeting, and then assess it again 10 days later. And I suppose when you have information, you can make decisions better. So I feel it's vital to walk. I know February is a very busy time on every farm, but I suppose if you can't do it yourself, or maybe there's facilities or services out there now that will come in and do it for you. So maybe look at along the lines of that if you can't get around yourself. But there is a big benefit of getting out and looking at your farm weekly in the month of February or March as well. So if it means pay someone to do it for you or pay someone to replace you in the yard for that couple of hours, it's definitely worthwhile not just to stick to the spring rotation planner, because I feel that's just lazy grass management to a certain degree that you could miss out, or it could cost you a lot of money long term as well. So I feel there's a big benefit of measuring there the 7 or 8 times in February and March as well, like, you know.
And I would say too that you're potentially missing out on capturing the total grass production in the year,
yes,
not measuring in the spring and the autumn time. I know you mentioned that 2017 was like a really, really good year for grass, and I think you called it a pet of a year, but like you grew in excess of 18 tons. Where do you go from here? Is there potential and scope to grow more grass on the farm, do you think?
Well, I'd say we definitely won't grow 18 tons this year, so it'll be getting back up from the dry weather or whatever this year, getting back up to make sure we grow it again next year. I suppose maybe we have to look at clover on the farm, and I suppose stay looking at them bottom paddocks and maybe thinking about taking them out to reseed them and see if there are better grass varieties coming through that'll push the growth further. And I suppose I feel if you could get the rotations are a big thing. Once you can keep around 10-11 rotations of the farm, you'll grow grass, because the grass is always green at the base then, and it'll grow a lot quicker green than it will coming from a yellow base. It's like cutting silage, and we would even be targeting doing probably more lower quantity cuts on the out farms even now than taking these big heavy cuts, that it's slowing down the recovery as well. So I suppose our whole system would have changed that way of thinking. You have better quality silage and just try and talk to your, I suppose, your contractor or whatever, and do deals on per acre or whatever it is, or per load or whatever it needs to be. But like we feel that if you can keep the base greenish enough, you'll grow a lot more feeds throughout the year, like, you know.
And the final question for you, Eddie, I've picked out 3 grazing targets that I've identified from your grass walk in April. So firstly, you close quite high. So the target that Teagasc would put out is maybe 550 or 600 kilos of an average farm cover. You're closing at 700. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I suppose the target we put out would be maybe a stock range of 2.4, 2.5 cows per hectare. So we'd be say 3 cows a hectare. So if you work on back, there's not much of a difference per cover per cow. So we want to we know we'll only grow kind of 4 to 5 on average over the winter on a normal year. Obviously, if you've got a lot of frost, you nearly want to be closing higher, but you don't know where it's going to happen or not. So we generally try and close around 700, and so we know we have to open around 950 or 1,000, or you're talking extra 2 or 3 kilos right through the February-March period of dry matter that's to go in. And if you put that across the farm, like if you put 3 kilos across the farm today, 300 cow herd, that's a ton a day. So that could be, if just say 40 ton on average over so like that's 7,000 or 8,000 euros is cost you straight away before you start the spring. So by not having the right opening cover, so that's just sacrosanct here now. You have to close that cover on both farms to have enough grass for the spring, like, and hopefully grow some bit over the winter, like, you know.
Yeah, and I suppose, like, you know, it makes a lot of sense. The higher stocking rate would need a higher average farm cover, and financially it's worth a lot more to you in the springtime to have that grass on the farm. And then to move on then to the spring, again, the target is to graze 30% in the month of February, so roughly 1% a day. So you're going beyond that, and you're grazing about 40% in February?
There's actually been years here we've been up to 50% on the home farm, because we all the cows were calved in home farm, so we moved cows off towards the end of February, so we would have been dropping stocking rates were lower. But I suppose obviously the stocking rates are up now across both farms, so we go 40% here and 33 or 4% on the out farm and start making up there earlier. So we feel that it's grass, and we would hit most of the lower covers actually would be grazed in February. So the 600, 700s, 800s, and they wouldn't have got slurry with trail and shoe in January. The ones that get slurry really are the ones that are closed in November. The 30% they get slurry in mid-January was trail and shoe, was umbilical trail and shoe, and the rest in the next, say 30 or 40% of the lower covers are the ones that are grazed in February, because the cows have a low appetite and they can go into 8 or 900s, and you train them into grazing pretty well. And like we do target 3.5 centimeters for the first rotation. Obviously, if it's they get 12 hours in a section, and we don't lose the strip wires and wires for the first round unless it's a complete unrealistic spring. So you're going to it's going to be wet a good bit of time. If they don't do a clean job in that 12 hours, so be it, you leave it there until the second round. But in general, we try and hit so it's about allocating the grass properly and working out what they need, and actually stepping it out for the first few weeks in February, actually stepping out or using an app on your phone or whatever, square meters or whatever it is. And we feel by having that graze, we have more grass growing in for the first week of April, and it sets it up for the second rotation and subsequent rotations after that, like, you know.
And I guess that 40% is pushing me on to the next question in terms of rotation length, and you've a short rotation length which lends itself to you achieving your 10 grazings per paddock, and with an addition of maybe a silage cut. At a 16 to 18 day rotation, would you be happy that you're not, say, impacting on grass growth there, Eddie?
Yeah, that's what there's a bit of talk about the 3-leaf stage of the plant, and you're maybe near to 19, 20 days. But I suppose we feel that we're getting into 1,500 pre-grazings at the 16 to 18 days there from. That probably happens there from the kind of the normal year, the 25th or 6th of April, right through until the middle of August. So that's the target, and like we aim for that target. And that's what he's given us rotations on the farm. we would have had 6 rotations completed there before the weather got really dry there. I suppose the 2 or 3 weeks ago. So obviously this rotation has gotten a lot longer because you're trying to hold whatever bit of grass you have. So the 10 grazes this year will be a bit of a challenge out there on the farm by the way the weather is at the moment. Like, it's probably after turning 1 rotation into, or 2 rotations that you would have at the moment into 1 rotation to try and keep some bit of grass in the cow's diet. So no, we feel that, I suppose you have to be, that's back into measuring twice a week. Like, you have to be on top of making decisions, because a lot can change when you're, like, if you're in a 16 or 15 day rotation and you make a mistake, like, you could be it's not for the faint hearted, let's put it that way. Like, so that's where I suppose the experience of measuring over a few years, you can make decisions like that. So it's probably the safer bet would be maybe stick to your 19, 20 days and get comfortable of what you're doing and making decisions. And obviously the whole farm has to be in good grass production as regards, there's no paddocks going to let you down. Like, if you're going around that quick, they have to be growing 80, 85 a day to get your pre-grazing right. So you all paddocks have to be at the same kind of standards and soil fertility and reseeding and stuff. So there wouldn't be much point trying to do that if you were at half farm reseed and half farm wasn't reseeded. You get cut out quite a bit. Like, so that's back to knowing what your farmer is capable of. So it takes time to do that, but we feel that's what's given us a lot of extra grass growth, since we would have pushed from the 20 days back in 2013, 14 up back down to 18, 16 days, and we feel we're getting extra grass growth because of it. Like,
I suppose just to re-emphasise, very much your 16 to 18 day rotation is dictated by your pre-grazing cover of your 1500.
Exactly, and like, we feel like 11-1200 isn't much good for a cow. When we started grass measuring first, the stock rate was only 2.2 across the milking blocks, and we were trying to go in at 1,000 every 100, and you're kind of allocating, your demand was 50 or 55 and you're 20 day rounds and you're at 1,100, but the cows just couldn't feed themselves or fill themselves, or just doing too much work to fill themselves. So it's easier, a cow will perform better at 1,400-1,500 of pre-grazing. So, and the farm will grow more grass in as well, because you're getting nearer to that tree leaf. So we feel that's kind of the happy medium as for where it's at. Like, but as I said, like, it's all worked back from your demand figure and working out many days and stuff like that, and taking your pre-grazing aspect,
That's great. Thanks, Eddie.
No bother at all.
That's it for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast, and my thanks to Eddie O'Donnell for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple and Google Podcasts, and for more information go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Emma Louise Coffey, and join me next time for your Dairy Edge.